Happy Monday afternoon, and what a way to start the week. Thanks for checking into our latest Traded Black podcast. I'm your host, Shad Dales. Well, got some more encouraging news from the former president and lead Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump late last night, where he basically doubled down supporting both Amendment 3 and either going even further with rescheduling and safe banking. So what does this mean? And do people believe that he's actually telling the truth and will follow through? Well, only one way to find out is we got some great guests on here today as well. We're going to bring in the founder and chairman of ATAI Life Sciences, Christian Angermayer, to give us a current state of affairs of the overall psychedelic space. As we know, MDMA was declined last month. There's a lot of misconception regarding this space right now. So we want to hear from probably the most respected person in the space on what's next for this industry. So let's welcome in TDR co-host Anthony Varel. Good to see you. Happy Monday and good day in the market for the space, don't you think?
Yeah, it was a great day in the market. Dolphins got the W yesterday, minus Tyreek getting arrested right before the game.
What a start.
But yeah, I'm excited to jump into this with Christian on the psychedelic front, and then have Brady come in on the cannabis front. Lot to talk about.
Lots to unpack. I will say I was a little nervous for your Dolphins. I don't know if they're going to pull that off, but was it a good game? Are the Jags good, or the Dolphins just played that bad?
Dolphins defense was ass in the first half. They saved us in the second and won the game. But I respect the Jags. The Jags, I think, are a good team. I like Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence looked like he was playing a guy. He was a guy that got paid. Tua looked a little bit lackadaisical at times.
Yeah. Well, lots to dive into with the show. And as I said off the top, we want to get a current state of affairs regarding the psychedelic space. So let's welcome in the founder and chairman of ATAI Life Sciences. He's the real life Benjamin Button, because each time I see him, he looks like he's getting younger and younger. Christian Angermayer, good to see you. How are things?
You know exactly how to charm me already at the beginning.
How are you?
All good. Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So where are you? Are you in Europe right now, or are you over here in North America?
Yes. No, I'm in London right now.
Nice.
How's
the summer been? Relatively, well, it was quick, I think, for a lot of people, but for the most part, I know there's a lot of stuff that happened regarding the industry, but how are you embracing, I guess, everything? And I know, I don't want to get too much into detail about what went right, what went wrong with obviously Lykos and the MDMA trials, but there's a lot of investors out there right now, I think, that are, have legitimate concerns about the industry, and there's any short-term catalysts. And when it comes to commercialization of drugs, the closest thing is Comp 360, which is 2027. But if you're concerned all about the space right now, what's the message that you're saying to, I guess, the people that you're speaking to among investors?
Well, I'm not concerned. And hopefully people shouldn't be concerned, because where do we start? Maybe the most important, although it's not a psychedelic or a Thai specific argument, but I said it, I think, when we saw each other last time, aside of obviously operational success, we all of us, all psychedelic stocks, but also in general biotech stocks, need a change of sentiment. So biotech is still the only, more or less only, let's say, high growth sector which hasn't recovered. If you look at large tech, but even small cap tech, but crypto is a great example. Bitcoin, more or less fully recovered from the interest rate induced downturn.
Yes.
Biotech hasn't. The reason, I think, is multifold, but I think one of the main reasons is that the biotech industry, the investors, especially not the companies themselves, but the investor set was comparable, is still comparable small. If you take tech investors, that's a multitude more of them than sort of the very still, although it's a global sector, niche biotech sector. So the entire pressure induced by interest rates on stock market or biotech stock prices has actually kind of led to almost, you could say, a wipeout of many funds, many investors whatsoever.
Yeah.
So it takes longer to rebuild that industry. So Bitcoin, and again, broad tech, had much more a stable foundation to come back quicker. But now the positive thing is, I deeply believe biotech is now really starting to come back. The industry is sort of about to, the investors industry, rebuild itself. And most important of all, interest rates start coming down. So that altogether, I think, will give us a favorable, long story short, macro environment for biotech, which we need in order to sort of, at least in terms of stock market prices, which also psychedelic stocks need to sort of drive again.
Okay, so taking this a step further, and more specifically the psychedelic space, How do you see like this industry? Like there's a lot of trials out there right now. How do you see this playing out? Is it still the status quo? Like I realize these are different trials, these are different compounds. Have you had conversations with representatives from Big Pharma recently? Like what's their take, based on how they're viewing this space right now?
I would say yes. So Big Pharma is definitely interested. So we as ATAI have a lot of discussions. But what we also can clearly see, and I think it's wrong on the pharma side, that they think they have more time to position themselves, strike partnership, take over companies than I believe they have. Why do they think that?
Okay.
They look at Spravato from Johnson & Johnson, and Spravato had a very slow start. And now just this year, but finally became a so-called blockbuster drug with more than $1 billion of revenues. So they believe actually that all psychedelic drugs, because of the novelty, the treatment paradigm shift we need among patients and providers, will just take a little bit of time. And that's where I personally have a 180-degree different opinion, because Spravato was years ago, that the world and sort of society and the perception of psychedelics was different when did it come to market, like 5 years ago or so whatever. Second, and don't want to criticize Johnson & Johnson, but Spravato is kind of the outlier in their product portfolio. So when back then, when Spravato was approved, when I talked to Johnson & Johnson sort of middle management people who were responsible for the rollout, they all back then, again, different time, were saying, oh, we kind of don't know what that is. Like we normally do cancer drugs and whatever. So a kind of psychedelic-ish drug was kind of a novelty within Johnson & Johnson. So I think they needed a year or two to get their internal head around what actually are we selling there. It's, by the way, side note, always this famous discussion, Rick Doblin, where I kind of on a personal level agree with him. It's just not what you can do as an industry. Like people who sort of work with these substances, obviously, I think easier know what it is if they've tried it. But anyway, but like sort of what I want to say, time was different. Johnson & Johnson didn't really like know how to embrace it till they found their mojo. And now it is a multi-billion-dollar drug. But I think that's not going to be that slow in the future when, for example, Compass and ATAI bring drugs to market, because we obviously fully sort of embrace the sort of nature or that these substances are psychedelics. Yeah. Also, by the way, Spravato has sort of pioneered now that what we call these 2-hour treatment window. And there's this, the saying like the pioneers take the arrows and the settlers take the land. Like we actually, thanks Johnson & Johnson, we go into sort of an existing infrastructure of therapists who are more and more widely successfully using Spravato, so they just then can take on psilocybin from Compass and all the other type drugs. So the infrastructure is now there, but most importantly, times have changed. Like go on Netflix, front page, how to change your mind. Everybody who's listening, just be mindful, because it's happening so often that people maybe don't even realize it, but how often at dinner conversations or whatever, psychedelics are coming up. Like I think psychedelics have arrived. This is not like almost no novelty anymore. And I'm very, very sure, long story short, that when Compass starts rolling out their psilocybin end of I would say somewhere in 2026, and maybe end of 25, but most likely early 26. And then ATAI is rolling out the other psychedelics just staggered years behind. I think it's going to meet a very ripe and open market. Okay. And that is what pharma is underestimating, but good for us.
So Christian, I mean, you were talking about pioneers and settlers. We've been covering this sector since its inception. And I mean, what we have seen as of recent was sort of shakeups in the human capital at the top of some of these companies. With this increased investment interest that you're thinking about from like a capital rotation standpoint, and as we get closer to commercialization, do you see the human capital kind of rotating out that's currently in and bringing in, let's say, seasoned executives from the current pharma sector into a bunch of these companies?
Meaning I'm very I would say, because it sounds like the question would sound, so I don't want to is as if the people who were there so far are not seasoned. Like
no, not saying.
Yeah, I would rather. By the way, I would say and Shaker, like the change. Like we promoted our chief scientific officer at ATAI to CEO. Yeah, Floridian is taking a little bit off. Like Compass got Kabir in a while ago. The truth is, by the way, and I see it, and luckily, like I always have that energy. Like I never thought about taking a break in my life, but like the truth is, by the way, I see that in tech, I see that in biotech, I see that in all these sectors who went through like pretty hard years the last let's say 2 years. People get exhausted, but it has nothing to do with psychedelics particularly. I think you always have then people who say, look, I need to take a break, like want to take a sabbatical, whatever. But I don't want to say that the people coming in are more seasoned at all. Like it's just like, I think it's, at least in the companies I can talk about, Compass and ATAI, the changes in the top or the add-ons were purely sort of for individual reasons. Where we say, look, I think Florian like is running ATAI and he's just leaving at the end of the year. So it's a very super friendly, like, and we were working together on the transition. He was just like, look, after, 7 years? Yeah, I need a break. Yeah. And I can understand it. Like 7 years is a long time, but he will stay in one form or the other very connected to ATAI.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And then, I mean, one thing that we were talking about for a long time in the psychedelic space were catalysts. So, I mean, we had the MAPS FDA meeting. We had the MAPS FDA decision. I mean, what are some other catalysts that you're looking at right now in the psychedelic space, let's say prior to commercialization in late 2026 to 2027?
So, by the way, let's maybe one, because you had the question before, and then I'm always answering like it, but I didn't. So let's maybe one sentence or one second about Lykos. Like, I think people know it, but I want to say it again. It was not a decision against MDMA, nor at all against psychedelics, because MDMA is not even a psychedelic. It's kind of in the same world, but like, it was a decision against the data set presented to the FDA by Lykos. And I don't want to go into too much detail because it doesn't matter. Like, I think it was a flawed data set. I think it was kind of leading up to that. It was clear, like they tried to kind of save it. I would have hoped for patients it would have worked out. But I have to say, I was a little bit worried because like one of the ways they tried to save it was to sort of mobilize also politics. And I'm a very deep believer that in any form of drug development, has nothing to do with psychedelics, politics has no place. It's all about science and data, and you have to show the outcome of trials, which sort of science or which are supposed to show, and then you get an approval. You shouldn't need to rally politicians or whatever, one way or the other. I think it's very also dangerous to politicize medical drug development. But like, again, important is it was not a decision against MDMA or whatever psychedelics at all. The FDA made clear they want that, if at all. But that has been already the viewpoint of ATAI and Compass before. It was a final clear verdict from the FDA that while, by the way, people are sometimes confused it when I read online stuff, the FDA doesn't want to see mixed up is like, how do I explain? Like, they don't want to see a sort of almost like call it a combination trial of therapy plus the drug, because then it's very hard to standardize it. And again, science is all about standardization. So by the way, what will be the case, what I always said, since we know each other, while you do psychedelics, you need a therapist. So the FDA made also clear, but that is not full therapy. That is sort of, you get sort of psychological assistance in the moment when you do psychedelics. And then personally, and by the way, let's a little bit think about chemotherapy. You would say if somebody undergoes chemotherapy, you would also say, please have a healthy lifestyle, ideally change things, stop smoking, whatever are your problems. The same, the recommendation would always be from me to a patient, or from me to like in general say, like, I think still full therapy and sort of psychedelics together are ideal, but the FDA wants to see psychedelics working standalone without a full therapy, but with obviously psychological assistance while you take it. And that's, by the way, how all the Compass trials and ATAI trials always have been set up. So we always make clear we believe in therapy, let's phrase it very positively, because it is actually very strong. Psychedelics are that powerful, at least in the trials we have shown data so far, that just psychedelics with psychological assistance in a moment deliver groundbreaking, really transformational results. My personal belief, and we're going to do a lot of studies after approval, would be, and if you then do full therapy, it's going to be even better. But don't mix both together while you sort of try to get the drug approved. Yeah, because then it's very hard for the FDA to sort of go through the data. And so that was safe to say.
Is it safe to say, from an approval perspective, psychedelic assisted therapy is what's going to be, I guess, the right semantics moving forward versus pure psychedelic therapy that takes a full?
I would say like assisted in the moment when you take it, and then people have the choice to do additional therapy. But in the approval, at least, you need to show. And by the way, it's easy to show. I believe it's very easy to show, because the drugs are so sort of powerful that just one trip of psilocybin or whatever, again, with the therapist in a moment, is actually bringing profound healing and improvement to patients.
So regardless of what compound was presented to the FDA first, it's all based on the right data and the right data settings. And that's where I think, what have we learned, I guess, from, the trial, being declined by the FDA? And for those that are in the space that are currently conducting trials, like, what's the takeaway, I guess, you as a company get from some of the feedback from the FDA that pertains to a different compound, a different trial, a different company? But are there things that you take away from that when you have the opportunity to eventually present to the FDA in a couple of years?
Look, I think that, and I don't want to sound too, clever or whatever. Like, I really mean it. Like, and again, it doesn't make me happy at all that MDMA is now maybe lost forever, at least the racemic, the classical MDMA, or at least will take years. But like, a lot of things we said since a very long time. For example, one thing is that, and I think everybody who knows me knows my personal passion for psychedelics.
Yep.
So if you would ask me, I would say, look, it's very clear, let's approve it tomorrow or whatever. But that is not how drug development works. And and I actually always said to my colleagues from the beginning, from 2016, 17 on, unfortunately, there will be people out there, because it's psychedelics, who will be very skeptical. Yeah, and the answer, as much as I would love it to be, cannot be, no, just believe me, or just talk like, the answer must be, then we are proven, and we have to prove it even more diligently and even more comprehensively in a traditional sort of clinical trial setting. It's always like, again, since we started ATAI and Compass, it's like data. So if you, for example, look at Compass phase 2B, it's round about the same size than Lykos phase 3 has been. Yeah, and the phase 3 of Compass is
that's a good point.
At least 2 times bigger, if not more, in terms of patients and everything. So trust me, as an entrepreneur, my heart is bleeding if we spend too much money. Yeah,
of course.
But like I was always saying, at least for the first trials, and it was always clear that Compass is one-off, and now it is the trailblazer. We have to be impeccable, because there will be people who are like, really?
What does the FDA look for as far as a patient count? Like, what's an ideal amount? I have an idea, but for those that are still trying to understand the space and how trials are conducted, like, what is a realistic amount that they look at this and it becomes more favorable when it comes to certain data that they review?
It depends on the indication, but I don't want to say the wrong number now, but at Compass, it's more than 400 people. I think I don't want to overstate it now, so sorry for that I have not on a feeling it is. Maybe it's even 800 something, but like, I'm going to look it up, like, or maybe one of us can Google it. I mean, but like, sort of, you need a solid sort of statistical.
I always thought it was between 500 and 800. That was the number that I've been told, but anyway.
But like, I just don't want to say the wrong number, but it's a multiple of what MAPS did. Yeah. Which, by the way, also, why had MAPS, Lykos, such a small trial? Because they worked to a long time. They had just the last minute, but maybe too late, switched into a for-profit mode. Yeah, they were always underfunded. Yeah, and there we can state now capitalism works. Like what
For
Compass
sure.
and ATAI did, raising money and going public, whatever, gave us sufficient liquidity and sufficient means to conduct sort of these large-scale trials. And again, at the end, it comes down to data.
Yeah. Well, that's just it, right? And I do know prior to this, there is a lot of dollars that were being allocated into this space the first half of 2024. So that's telling, to say the least. But I guess the main takeaway here is that nothing really changes outside of like all the companies that are currently conducting their trials. But like anything, and this is the challenge, I think, with investors here today, it just takes time. That's biotech for you, though, right?
Yeah.
Yep. But like maybe last sentence, like very simplified, I think you can say all psychedelic stocks, the good ones, like in the boom phase of biotech, novelty, or in general in boom phases of any industry, novelty is a bonus.
Yes.
Yeah.
When markets go down, novelty normally is a malus, is like a bad thing. Like, because then people are like, oh Jesus, the world is hard enough, and I buy the cardiovascular whatever treatments I much more understand, which is much more normal. But like this is why I think all biotech stock or all psychedelic stocks overall lost sort of more than the index, more than the normal stuff, or the more conservative, but the more regular stuff. But as I said, I deeply believe, not regarding one stock, but I deeply believe biotech in general will be one of the best performing asset classes like in the next 12, 18 months. And then normally novelty combined with the massive market all these mental health companies, psychedelic companies are addressing should become a good thing again. So I think stocks like ATAI and Compass have sort of the biggest turnaround potential.
So if the right data, politicians, you think in Washington, if it's telling based in future trials, they'll look at this like.
No, can I already stop you? No, politicians don't have to look at it. And I don't want them to look at it because medical drug development is not political. It's not cannabis where we want any political decision like you just said with President Trump. No, because it's about cannabis, of a consumer, that's a total different bucket.
Completely.
Once you deliver the proper data set to the FDA will approve these drugs like they approve any other drug. Have you ever heard a cancer drug being up for political vote?
No.
No, because like it's about data. And if the data is proper, and if the data is telling, and if the data sort of shows, by the way, what we all expect, and everybody knows my conviction in psychedelics, but if the data shows no big risks, like and that sort of effect, and if the data is, how you say, integer, like has integrity, like there was a lot of, again, I don't want to go too much into negative things, but like it's all online, like, there was a lot of critique on the data set of Lykos. But like if you have proper data which shows proper positive impact with manageable, reasonable downside, which I all expect more. Again, we all know psychedelics, super low risk, haven't seen any bad stuff, like plus the upside extremely big. Then the FDA will approve it, and it's a decision of the agency, which then automatically, by the way, will lead to a rescheduling of the drug. No political sort of interference in any way needed and wanted.
When is that? So that's 90 days, correct? That if you presented the correct trial or the correct data, and then as far as rescheduling process, that would then take up to 90 days, or is it longer than that?
Yeah, no, I think it's 90 days. Yeah.
Okay. Last thing I'll bring up to you, I noticed that you had a recent appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast, which I'm sure that was quite the experience, to say the least.
But he's amazing. I was really nervous, but he's amazing.
Well, I hope one day we can have that same kind of stage, but we're obviously working away.
We're going there together. You can always say I was earlier at you than at Joe Rogan.
Yeah. But, my question is outside of just saying, like, what was the experience like? But in any way with that appearance, did it help bring a lot of attention towards the space? Like, what kind of feedback did you get after, appearing on that podcast?
So most of the topic was about another project I started, the Enhanced Games, which the very simple sentence is like, think about the Olympics, so a major sports event for track and field and similar stuff, but where performance enhancing drugs, colloquially called doping, are not just allowed, then endorsed. But we also spoke a little bit about psychedelics, and actually also the same what we discussed, maps and whatever. So I think it was a good sort of platform for our psychedelic work, and then obviously for the work in sports.
Yeah, that's good. Well, great experience to say the least. How was that all set up? Like, you have some people that just know him or know his team directly. Like, that's pretty.
He was very excited about the idea of the enhanced games without knowing us. So we were like,
it's great.
Talked about like in 5 or 6 sort of different podcasts. He was talking to other guests he had about psychedelics. About enhanced games. So I don't even remember if we emailed him or he emailed us, whatever, but we were like, hey, like, if you really like it, like, you seem to like it, like, here we are. Yeah, let's have a direct conversation.
Yeah, it's great. Well, I know Anthony wanted to bring up the whole other side of conversation when it came to the enhanced games. I think that's another conversation we'll have to save for another time. But, I will say if
you have a question, or like, if you think it's
far away, go ahead. You got to ask one question, Anthony.
I mean, what are there combat sports? Was one of my main questions. Like, is there going to be like boxing, wrestling, mixed martial arts?
Yes.
Or are you just talking about pure performance sports?
We want to do also one combat sports. And I know that's going to be, we need to put a lot of thought in it, because like, obviously the immediate answer will be, oh my God, like, and then they can sort of hit themselves harder. To be fair, by the way,
yeah,
there are studies, like the 2 really crazy studies are, the very exact number is that WADA, the international doping agency, they made anonymous surveys finding out that more than 40%, I think it was 44% of all track and field athletes have taken forbidden substances. By the way, forbidden, not legally forbidden, because there are a lot of people like get confused, but which are banned in the Olympics. There's a difference. Okay. By the way, 25% of the stuff which you find at GNC is banned at the Olympics, but have taken banned substances, 44%.
Yeah.
The number in combat sports like boxing, which sort of floating around the Aero study, is way more than 50%.
Oh, yeah.
So my one of my main arguments how we came up with the idea, and why I deeply believe it's the right one, is that, by the way, a little bit similar what we just had with drug development, data and transparency always wins. Yeah, I would love an Olympics which is completely clean, because that makes sense. That's a great idea, but it's not. And then it's very unfair, because like, if around about half of the people dope secretly, that makes it completely absurd. Yeah. And the same in combat sport, like, if 2 people want to fight with each other, at least there should be level playing field, and not one should be like secretly doped and the other not. So transparency is one of our keys. Yeah.
I'm with you on that 100%. I mean, I'm not going to name names, but I know professional athletes that do what they need to do to keep their bodies in tip-top shape. So I think it's I
believe performance enhancing. I wrote a whole blog post about it. By the way, 2 things, like a little bit of shameless self-promotion of my Substack, but like everything we just discussed on ATAI and more, like at the beginning of the year, I made a very long blog post available publicly on Substack. If you just put in my name and Substack, or also on LinkedIn, either you Google my name on LinkedIn or Substack, then you find all my arguments for ATAI. And I made the same for like performance enhancing in general in sports, but also in sort of life, because I think actually sort of my big thought, which is, since I did the blog post actually quicker than I thought becoming reality in the markets, by the way, is that I think performance enhancing in all its forms, it's the biggest financial investment opportunity of the next decade.
Wow.
Yeah, and especially in biotech. And the first one we've seen, I think, and when I tell you now, you're like, okay, yes, that is kind of performance enhancing, was Ozempic and Mounjaro, or are like, so the most sort of successful blockbuster drug of the last 10 years or whatever, these GLP-1 drugs. Yeah, totally. They added in total more than $1 trillion market cap to Novo Nordisk and Lilly, and by the way, not because it's just for people who want to lose weight, but because, like, what was the number I read, 70 or 80% of the users of Mounjaro and Ozempic are people like me, by the way. I'm on Ozempic because it's just outsourced discipline. So, and my prediction is, and the next one is, if you read the January one, which when I posted it, is becoming reality now. The next one is muscles. So there are some really interesting IPOs lining up for muscle growth, getting muscles without training or getting muscles easier. Yeah, and all of that. And again, think about it. If there is a drug available where you put on muscles much easier with less training, not just very old people who need it will take it because they have a sudden muscle loss called sarcopenia, but all of us going to take it because why would we train more in the gym if we can train less and have the more outcome? And by the way, that was always so, and I'm very consistent in that view, my sort of, and I'm still, by the way, and I know the share price didn't go there at all so far, but I'm still standing what I said at the IPO. I believe in some years from now, ATAI can be a 20 billion plus company. Why? So, which obviously now more than actually at the IPO gives us a 100x upside potential. But why? First, and I sound like a broken record, but we hopefully, and I'm deeply convinced, with ATAI and Compass, we're going to solve big parts of the mental health crisis, which already in itself is the number one problem, both of our healthcare system and of society. But beyond that, the same like Ozempic, think about it, like once psychedelics are available, and we all have discussed in previous podcasts, sort of the positive benefits of psychedelics, even for people who are not clinically defined sick, who don't necessarily need to have a depression. Maybe people just have a stressful time in their life and they don't want to get depressive. They know, oh, this is a really hard year for me. I have a breakup. I have a loss of a loved one. I have problems in my job.
It's maintenance. It's maintenance.
It's maintenance. Yeah. And by the way, and then someone, even after maintenance, there's one more thing. Look, why do people go to the gym and want perfection? Because, like, by the way, who tells us where actually depression starts? Like, I always turn the question around. You can ask into a room of people and say, who's depressive? And if people would be honest, you maybe would have like 10%. Yeah. But if you turn the question around, it's like, who's truly deeply happy, or who doesn't want to be more happy? Wherever you are, there is a more to it if you want to. Maybe, so my prediction is that give it 5 years from now, give it 6 years from now, like Ozempic for weight loss, and then suddenly people like me take it because it's just better and easier and nicer for them. The same, people will say, you know what, I want to have, like, I'm always very open, like in a country where it's legal, I'm doing a psychedelic trip with a therapist in a proper setting once or twice a year. I can afford it now, I can travel somewhere, whatever. But in the future, people will go to their therapist and say, look, whatever, I want it because it's good for me. It gives me something more. Yeah. And that market is equally big, if not bigger, than the weight loss market, than the muscle market, whatever. It's just like some years away. But I promise we're going to sit here after the approval of Compass psilocybin and the other drugs, and we will revisit it. Yeah. And everybody can sort of bookmark that or record that and hold it against me. Yeah. Or hopefully for me. But you can send that clip. The success, the commercial success of psychedelics, because the market is much wider and bigger than we think, will be much, much bigger than people expect now. And that's sort of my very high conviction view on it. And in that whole topic of enhancements, because we all can need a little bit more happiness in our life, need a little bit of more of that.
All is well then in the psychedelic space. Listen, appreciate the time. Let's keep in touch. But glad we got some of the feedback, but this is encouraging for the space. So I hope that answers some of the people's questions regarding the space. But tell the team that we say hi. And like I said, let's keep in touch. I will appreciate the time. Okay.
Anytime back again.
All right. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Talk soon.
All right. Take care. All right. Monday afternoon. And all right, everybody's now waiting for this. So without further ado, let's welcome in CEO of Sunburn Cannabis, Brady Cobb, to the podcast here on a Monday. How are things?
What's up, sir?
Happy Monday, gentlemen.
Before we get started, do you guys want to talk another 40 minutes? We're trying to cut that short. Christian,
I'm all for longevity. Yeah, I'm all for longevity, stem cells, HGH, peptides. That's all way better. I'm trying to live till I'm at least 150, 160. So
That's impressive.
I've got no problem with what he's preaching. And I mean, I've got no problem allocating resources to it. But yeah, let's dive into the cannabis conversation.
Well, if there's a person I think that could probably live to 150, it's probably you, Brady. You got quite the life, my friend. And I will say, I know the cannabis space is not an easy one, but man, you're making the most of it. And when I see a lot of the posts going on, it's the work-life balance. But the story continues to build in Florida. And I will say last night, Donald Trump obviously grabbed our attention. What was it, 11:18 regarding that post? But, you know, we looked at this. He outlined and kind of doubled down on his views on Amendment 3. He went further and outlined rescheduling and safe banking as well. This is an administration back between 2016 and 2020. Didn't get anything done, kind of like the Biden administration. But here we are, fast forward to 2024. Have times changed? And if so, why do you think that is?
Yeah. So for me, the key with Donald Trump in 2016 is he didn't promise cannabis reform change.
He didn't comment. He didn't comment.
I think that's a key distinction. I don't think the issue was evolved enough in 2016. It was certainly a tier 2 or a tier 3 issue. I can tell you that because I was lobbying the Hill. It was largely a West Coast story, and it was largely Florida had just gone medical, and it was largely a Canadian story. So it wasn't necessarily on the national radar of Republicans. It certainly might have been on Democrats, but they were just pandering. Most of the lobby in cannabis in DC at that time frame was the former the Obama team that had done the gay marriage initiative. So they just kind of put it to a new issue. And when I started lobbying up there, no one was really focused on Republicans. I'll give Jim Hagedorn credit. He and I both were clients at BGR Group. We began going around and meeting with Republicans. And the other knock on Trump has always been that he just, you know, Jeff Sessions, you know, was his true ambassador on cannabis and rescinded the Cole memo. Well, little known fact, but there's an article on it for people that want to go read it. Trump didn't know Sessions was going to do that. I mean, as we saw with the DEA and Milligram, I'm sure if Kamala Harris had her way, they wouldn't have had a hearing, if I had to bet, on our rescheduling request. Sometimes agency heads just kind of do what they want. And Jeff Sessions certainly didn't get it clear that he was going to rescind the Cole memo. And there was a great Fox News article about the chaos that ensued thereafter, and they're certainly not friends. So the big difference for me is he never made a position. He never took a position. You know, I can tell you that when we worked with his staff and or his agency staff while he was president, including the Treasury Secretary, they were bullish on safe banking because they wanted the money in banks. He's a capitalist. He doesn't drink or smoke. So he wanted to see what the value that he could tax and what the size of the industry was and what kind of tax revenue he could generate from it. So that to me is when I've been eating shit from, you know, all the liberal people on Twitter for the better part of the last 4 years for saying that one of the, you know, I'd say probably one of two voices, especially going back 3 or 4 years, that was saying, you know, Republicans would like to fix cannabis. It's because of states' rights and revenue. You know, he's been consistent in that regard. And the statement last night was the strongest statement I think we've seen from any candidate on cannabis reform.
Yeah.
He was pretty particular.
I spoke to Rob Seacrest late last week, and he was basically saying, like, look, he's the type of person I think he's a transactional politician. And this is something that when he looks at this from a capitalist standpoint, if he's going to commit to something, he does not flip-flop whatsoever. And I know Rob definitely has a lot of big contacts out of Washington, but would you not agree with that? He is a transactional person, and kind of reiterate as to what you just said, like he's a capitalist and is looking at this from a pure numbers perspective. Because like you said, he doesn't drink or smoke.
Yeah, I think Rob's spot on in what he said. And I think it's been consistently what I'm saying. This is a matter of states' rights. And Donald Trump has always taken the position that states' rights matter, and the state should be left to decide these types of issues. That's been his position on abortion. Point, which we don't need to go into. That's a hand grenade to lay on. But on cannabis, he's been consistent that he believes as far back as 2017, 2018, that the state should decide. Each state's different. If Kansas' electorate doesn't want it, great, respect their rights. If Florida's electorate votes in favor of it, awesome. But it should be in a way, because right now the federal government and or the state governments have a very limited opportunity to generate revenue from the industry. And I can remember sitting in a meeting in D.C. with very high-ranking officials in the Senate and the House, and I raised my hand and said, I just want everybody in this room to know I'm the only guy paying a guy like Haley Barber and his firm to lobby because I want to be taxed and regulated.
Right.
Most people hire firms like this to not be taxed and regulated. And the reason I want to be taxed and regulated is once you get used to my tax revenue, I'm never going away.
Totally.
Correct.
I'm now part of the system. So
well said.
It's a very interesting thing for him to say. And I would say the word choice and how he chose to list that statement. The last couple of statements were more veiled. You know, I think it's great. I want to look at it. I'm voting yes on Amendment 3.
It's pretty impressive.
Correct.
I believe
you think
followed through. I believe safe banking should happen. I mean, it was not, there was no pitter patter or anything left to interpretation. I was very, very impressed by the tone and the tenor of what he said.
So with him saying that he's going to vote yes on 3, I mean, do you think that I don't want to say seals the deal because we do have a high threshold to hit getting above 60%, and obviously things can happen. But I mean, do you think that's a ringing endorsement that could change people's votes and heavily influence 3 passing versus him not coming out and speaking in favor of it?
I would say it's the strongest possible endorsement, in my humble opinion, that I could have imagined we would receive. I did not. If you want to know if my 2024 bingo card had Donald Trump issuing a statement like that, did not. And
right.
I say that as of last week. I had lunch with Joe Gruters last week, and even after that lunch, I felt bullish. I still didn't think I'd see something like this. I didn't think I'd see rescheduling and/or safe banking mentioned statement as well. So. Right. Was, you know, not getting high on hopium. We still got a lot of work left to do, but this also sets up a very interesting discussion and moment of reckoning within the Republican Party in Florida, because we got my former friend, and he's still my friend, but my you know, that his team led by James Upmeyer, who I don't have the highest level of respect for. And I say that because I've offered to be the contrarian in the room, as I have for a long time with the governor's staff, and the guy just won't even return emails, which to me is just professional.
Yeah.
They always email when they want you to host an event, but they don't, you know, when you're hitting them with facts that they don't want to hear. I mean, to read some of this crap he's throwing at Kim, and look, Kim and I have always been the best of friends, but I respect the hell out of her and what she's done and her commitment. And at the end of the day, to see some of the stuff there, you know, to see his press team, like that girl, Christina Pulishar or whatever, yesterday coming out and say, you know, that the money's going to benefit, you know, there's tax revenue, it's going to somehow benefit True Leave. I'm going, well, you must be smoking Delta 8 vapes, because that doesn't make any sense. We physically cannot tax medical. It's in the amendment in 2016. You cannot tax medical. It's treated pharmaceutical drugs. Pharmaceutical drugs in Florida have no tax. The only way the state can generate any tax revenue off the cannabis industry is twofold. One, create a wholesale market and tax it B2B. So if I want to buy 100 pounds of something from Curaleaf for inventory purposes, they could tax that transaction because the patient isn't paying the price. Second, recreational passes, and you put a 9% sales tax. And I've actually shared with the governor's office, and we had a call with their appropriations and their budget team, exactly what it would look like in year one on a conservative basis at a $3 billion market. You're talking over $600 million of tax revenue, enough that the governor could send a trim notice out to every Florida homeowner that their property taxes have been paid down by 25 to 30% to offset the rise of insurance premiums. We delivered that entire plan to the governor's office, to James Upmeyer and his team, and I can't get a call or an email back because they seem to. What I honestly think is happening is that they're trying to use Amendment 3 as a way to down ballot attack Amendment 4, because they don't want to attack Amendment 4 on a frontward attack, because they'll get crushed on the abortion issue and women's rights in Florida. So this sets up, I believe, a very politically interesting day of reckoning.
No kidding. Anthony, real quick before I get into something, I want to mention, you said this to me, but for those that don't live in Florida, there was a lot of ads that ran during the Dolphins game yesterday talking against Amendment 3. You want to maybe outline some of that messaging that you saw?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, granted, I'm not a political analyst and I'm not a campaign manager, but at the same time, like if I was running a campaign, I'd at least want to run it on merit and facts. And the ads that were ran during the Dolphin game yesterday were predominantly Amendment 3 is going to make a monopoly. It's a monopoly amendment, not a marijuana amendment. It bans home grow within the Constitution of the state of Florida, which is false. We've had Kim on, we've had Brady on, we've had plenty of Florida CEOs on that are for home grow due to the single the single issue statute nature of it, it would have never got past the Supreme Court with home grow. So that's false. And then just going into corporate greed. And as Brady just alluded to, the tax revenue that's going to be generated from Amendment 3, if and when it passes, is going to be substantive. This can be allocated towards schools. It can be allocated towards urban development. It can be allocated towards homeowners' property taxes,
right?
Where the number one thing in Florida right now is bringing down those property taxes to offset the insurance premiums that we're all getting killed with that live in the state of Florida. It's just a function of living here. So their campaign, they pelted the broadcast. I was watching it on Hulu, so I'm assuming I was getting geo-targeted with ads. Every commercial break to every second break had an anti-Amendment 3 ad. Several of them, though, also had pro-Amendment 3 ads that were mixed in to the ad mix.
So you said a market of $3 billion, Brady, which would create $600 million in tax revenue, correct?
Yeah, plus or minus, correct.
And then what's the medical market size right now? Isn't it 2.6, 2.5? That's pretty conservative.
It's somewhere in the two. So again, we built conservative revenue assumptions. You want to know what my belief is? I think the revenue assumption of this is going to be, because remember, it'd only be basically a half year in year one. I think full year 26, you would see if it's below 4 billion, I'll be shocked. Course of residents that are coming through here. We're pulling that data from our partners in the alcohol industry. So it's a massive market. And Anthony nailed it. The positioning that you're seeing from the DeSantis administration, it just defies logic. And there's a lot of his big check writers out there. And I've supported him and hosted a lot of events. And I've been active on Twitter supporting him through the years. This is the guy that legalized flower. I mean, you're going to tell me that corporate greed trumps getting veterans off opioids, and you want to lecture me on corporate greed when you partnered with a hedge fund manager, Ken Griffin from Citadel, who fucked Chicago up enough and then had to move down here to get away from it? I mean, what planet are we living on?
We live on a planet now where you can't behind this. There's access to information, I think, for a lot of people. But look, I don't want this to be a platform where we're leaning towards Republican or Democrats. I want this to be approach from both sides. If you're the Dems right now, look, the Biden administration recommended that we should have rescheduling take place. That's been stalled once again. But, the hearing's pushed off. At least we're here. I don't want to knock that, to say the least. But knowing, because I know, Anthony, you said on Friday, this is basically an initiative that Trump couldn't steal. I would think 72 hours later, you're probably looking at this differently. He's saying that. What's the approach? Because the Dems pretty much are going to have to be forced to reply and respond to something related to this.
I would say that Trump has now stolen the issue. And I tweeted out on the TDR Twitter this morning that there was a 360 statement by him. I meant that in the sense of it was an all-encompassing statement. He hit on the points that all of us wanted to hear. Rescheduling, safe banking, Amendment 3 in Florida, which is adult use and decrim. There's no facet of cannabis reform that Donald Trump has now not spoken to. We have not seen anything from the Harris administration. And as far as I'm concerned, the rescheduling of cannabis and the HHS 255-page report was the Biden administration. That was Joe Biden that put that into process. Kamala Harris now has had the torch passed to her.
Correct.
She needs to come out and say what her policy is going to be as it relates to cannabis. Am I going to sit here and say that she's done nothing? Absolutely not. Because she was part of the Biden administration. But she has rescheduling. She has a Democratic senator that has the votes for safe banking. There's hope that can be attached to that does social equity as well as criminal justice reform. There are levers that she can pull. They just put a website of all of her issues for this year's campaign. Cannabis is not on the fucking website. The fact that she's zero dark 30 on it, I don't understand for the life of me how to justify that, unless maybe she wants to roll back maybe some of it, which I don't even think that's possible. I'm just saying that to add conjecture. But I'm stumped on the Harris administration stance towards cannabis.
Brady, why is that? To me, it's like they had full control of this, and it is quite surprising because they had a lot of momentum built. But again, it's just, we look at this right now, I'm like, how have they not responded? Because when I look at this next debate and this topic gets brought up,
It will.
it is incredible
Yeah.
the upper hand that Donald Trump will have pertaining to this, because she can't hide behind the idea that she has brought cannabis reform. Yes, the idea of rescheduling has taken place, but that's been pushed back. And Trump's easily going to respond by saying, look, coulda, woulda, shoulda. But that's what we've been hearing for the past 4 years. But I am surprised they have not responded up until now. But why do you think that is?
I mean, I just so, I completely agree with you. First and foremost, Shad, this needs to be a bipartisan effort. This is not a win or lose, Republican or Democrat. As a cannabis industry and as someone that's been fighting for the plant for the better part of my adult life, and seeing this, largely in my father's legacy, I don't care who does it. I always love the old Kennedy quote, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. So at a minimum, what happened this morning, I would argue, is a great step forward for, we are now kind of that child that bounces between mom and dad. And now they're both trying to they're going to either have to one up each other or Donald Trump's going to own the issue. But at a minimum, now a tier 1 issue. And I fully believe you're going to hear a question tomorrow night in that debate that will tackle cannabis. And we're going to know from Kamala what her position is. But like Anthony, I'm completely politically, and I love politics. I'm a political junkie. I am stumped at why she has.
You're on mute, Brady. Sorry.
This is an issue that polls very strongly. You very rarely do you see a Gallup poll, probably going all the way back to 2022-ish. It's been consistently above 65% nationally want cannabis reform to happen, and decriminalization and or rescheduling. And the Republican number has steadily creeped up from that 40-ish range to over 55% range. And Donald Trump's a savvy enough politician and businessman to realize, okay, if she's not going to do it, I'm going to go take it, whether he loves it or not. He's now on record. The fact that she didn't beat him to that punch after that, popularity contest that was the DNC convention, which was light on substance and heavy on former politicians endorsing her.
Yeah.
I would have expected the opposite. I would have expected, we rescheduled and we're going to lean in on this. But then, it still baffles me that the DEA didn't slam this through. As I shared on the podcast I joined with you guys, or the stream I joined with you guys at Wild, that one still makes no sense to me. Because generally, the political appointee of a president and vice president, you tell them to get something done, it's done. And they wanted it done by the election. They already mistakenly tweeted out that they achieved cannabis rescheduling. This is kind of another drop ball. They spiked it's that wide receiver that spikes the ball on the 1 yard line on the way into the end zone and doesn't actually cross the threshold and then spike the ball. Donald Trump, that's a bit more like Barry Sanders. He's grabbing the ball and running back towards the referee.
So Joe Greisler just brought up a pretty good point. What if she knows that the DEA is going to kill this thing come December?
Maybe. That could very well be it, at which point they're going to look even worse.
I know.
The thing I was concerned about was Trump not mentioning anything and then going into a debate and her actually claiming that there was some sort of cannabis reform when it's so far from the truth, but yet people would believe her because they're not up to speed in the space like many of us follow here. But, here we are now in the situation that we're in, and this has become more and more of an interesting topic of conversation leading up to the election, which is all we pretty much could ask for right now. We just wanted to be part of a conversation, and this is exactly what we have. So, look, for those viewers that are watching this that are still trying to learn this space, in the event, let's say you saw Trump win the election, and many people do believe that there's a real good chance that the Republicans could control both the House and the Senate. If that were to happen, what then needs to happen for safe banking to pass?
Someone to actually put it up for a vote. That's all that's needed to happen. And the excuse of McConnell will kill it. McConnell's before he slowed down a little bit, he was a consummate deal maker. You don't serve as the leader of the Senate or the minority leader of the Senate for that long unless you know the art of the deal and how to cut a deal. So he would have cut a deal, and I'm telling you this from the inside, and I tweeted about this, so I got the receipts. If Schumer wanted to hold a vote and press him and cut a deal when we had it in the NDAA or any of the omnibus approach bill, there was a cost for it to get in there. Plain and simple. Everything has a cost. The old adage of you got to give to get. What's the give? Chuck, you want it? Great. I want this. That Schumer never engaged in that. Booker, in fact, said, I'm laying down in front of the train tracks unless we get social equity. And then he has the gall to show up to every one of our industry conferences trying to hold a fundraiser. I think he raised about $8 at the last one. So at the end of the day,
that much?
SAFE, I think SAFE just needs a fucking vote. I was so happy to see a Senate hearing in the committee hearing. It was great. It passed with bipartisan support. Where the hell has it been since? Where's it been?
Hey, if Donald Trump is elected, $64,000 question. If Donald Trump is elected, do you believe safe banking passes at some point in 2025?
I think that's a safe assumption, but I'm not putting anything on the line with safe. I'll have pitchforks at my front door. So I will say this: if Donald Trump wins the overall election, that means Amendment 3 has passed, and that means that Florida is about to become the largest market in the world.
Yeah, makes sense. Listen,
so better yet, I'll one up you, Shad, with the polarizing questions. So as far as what we also saw this weekend, we saw Newsom through a emergency order ban intoxicating hemp products. You think Ronnie put something like that into place as soon as the election's over, and he doesn't have to deal with the pissed off hemp lobby any further?
I think you're going to see. So I think there was an expectation when they did this deal, and Evan Power, who I won't comment on, convinced them to do it. I think they millions and millions and millions was going to flow in from the hemp industry, but we largely know that doesn't exist. It's mom and pop convenience store owners primarily in Florida. There's 9,600 locations in Florida, and they're all, you've seen them, Anthony. Yeah. They're not big check writers. So I do think there's already a bill in process to go back again. I think the mistake that was made in Florida was that the bill that passed this year was too encompassing. It included too much. It banned CBD. It banned Delta 8. Cannabinoids that are not synthetic that are fine. This is simple. We need a THCA fix, and we need the intoxicating derivative fix. Yeah. And I also tell you to keep a keen eye on the Farm Bill negotiations, because I wouldn't be surprised to see something potentially happen at the federal level. The DEA has on record saying and written a letter to Congress and the negotiators of the Farm Bill, because it's renewed this year. It's a 5-year bill. It was passed in 2018. That they believe THCA should be scheduled the same as THC, which makes fucking sense, because THCA
makes complete sense.
THC when you light it. So I suspect you'll see. I would keep a keen eye on DC over the next 2 to 3 weeks, because that'll be a lame duck bill. The Farm Bill will be a lame duck bill that happens after the election. That may fix the problem. If it's rescheduled to be scheduled right alongside THCA, that THCA is probably 80-90% of the hemp-based sales right now. It'll go the way of the dinosaur overnight.
Wow. I was going to say, THCA gets scheduled the same as cannabis. That means interstate commerce is gone and they're dead in the water.
Bye-bye.
They've got no leg to stand on. And by the way,
they're operating under a loophole, right? If Ron got a bill on his desk to ban THCA and the other synthetic and dangerous intoxicating hemp, I believe he would sign that one. I think if that bill would have landed this year, he would have signed it. But it would have put CBD operators out of bit. It was too broad.
Yeah. By the way, I do not think the DEA is going to squash rescheduling. I thought Joe brought up I don't think that. I don't even think they can at this point if they wanted to. I don't think there's any facts and data to back it up and go the other way. That being said, I thought Joe had an interesting point that I haven't thought about, because every single person that's probably watching this live stream, and everyone with maybe the exception of a select few in the industry, have no idea why Kamala is just radio silent on the issue. It doesn't make sense.
Irish Avenger would finally bring the two industries together for the same cause. I agree. Listen, you outlined before.
It'd bring them together, but it'd kill them at the same time. Like I got my Kiva Delta 9 gummies today in the mail.
There's your title.
They're not that wouldn't be possible if it gets amalgamated with cannabis via the Controlled Substances Act.
Before I let you go, you outlined like word for word. It was pretty telling what Donald Trump posted on his Truth Media, a social media platform. I know Kim, has been talking with the Trump administration. Do you guys know if she's speaking at all with Donald Trump directly, or is it more or less like she is speaking to him directly? Like, have you had any feedback, Brady, on because this is some great messaging that he's been saying for the space that we've seen over the past week. So clearly the conversations that she's having directly with him are working if you're in full support of cannabis reform and wanting to push this industry moving forward?
I would give a huge amount of credit to Kim, and equally, if not more, to Senator Joe Gruters, who was a former Republican Party chair of Florida, who has been an advisor to President Trump for a number of years. I would give both of them a tremendous amount of credit for the advocacy they've done one-on-one. And there's several others in the space, Jason Weil, myself, Boris, that have been on this side of it and working this side of it. There's some organizations out there that have focused on the other, largely on the other side. I'm not gonna trash anybody. We're having a good day today, but I would give Kim and Joe Gruters both a tremendous amount of credit.
Great.
Big.
It's awesome. Conversations being had, but like you said, whether it's from the Republican side or the Democrat side, we just want this conversation to go. And look, if there's something positive that Vice President Kamala Harris comes out with, then we're going to be covering that as well and fully supporting that as well. Nothing to do with us supporting. We just like covering this right now because there's a lot of positive news that's coming out on the Republican side over the past 9 days. So hope people understand that. And listen, appreciate obviously you catching up with us here today. Just got word James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, just passed away at 93 years old. The guy was legend.
Guy was also legend.
Sandlot, man. Movie. I watched that with my go. That's the movie.
Right? Yeah. All right. Well, mad respect for Kim and a few others, but Brady and as well. Keep up the great work, and thanks for informing us and keeping us up to date.
Thanks, boys. Anthony,
all right.
Thanks for having you.
Yeah, it was great to be up there this weekend.
Yeah, you guys had a great little trip. I know you guys flew up to was it Panama City for a grand opening?
Panama City Beach.
Nice. How was that? I know you guys had a little of a delay, but the flight was okay with some of the storms that came through.
Yeah, it was good. It was good to see the store. It was packed. Good to see the street team in action and the events that they do from a grassroots perspective for patients, and just to get the brand into people's hands.
Yeah.
You don't see anybody really in Florida wearing cannabis merch other than what you see with the sunburn hats and the shirts, and I mean they're everywhere. I think Brady sent me a picture actually yesterday. There was one of the valets at the Dolphin game was randomly wearing a sunburn hat. I mean, you're not going to see that with any of the other brands.
I'm 20 minutes from Detroit, and this is more of a Florida thing. I've got guys that are basically traveling down to Florida that follow the podcast. And I woke up on Sunday morning and there was a knock on my door, and like these guys are collecting all this stuff and dropping it off. So everybody is in full support. I think if you're a cannabis investor pertaining to this space, and tomorrow night should be telling. Mohammed Shaheen writes, Anthony, sorry, I got a comment there that kind of messed me up. Anthony, does Kamala say something tomorrow? Your guess?
I think they're asked a question on cannabis.
I
think they're both asked a question on policy moving forward. I think then Trump is going to probably attack her prosecutorial record. And then she's probably going to attack him for Jeff Sessions rescinding the Cole memo, and the rest will be history. But I do think that there is rhetoric regarding the cannabis industry on the debate stage tomorrow.
I just think about this tomorrow night during the debate and the angle that Donald Trump can use, because she can talk about cannabis reform. The idea has been brought up, the Biden administration, but nothing has really passed and nothing's for sure certain. Like, I still believe rescheduling were to happen, but up until this point, no cannabis reform has been passed into law. And Donald Trump can basically play that card about how many people that she's locked up. And whether you believe it or not, it's not going to help her case, but he's clearly stolen this conversation.
No, but I mean, she can easily bark back with, well, look nationwide at the prohibitionist party for cannabis. Look at the AGs that are rallying against rescheduling. They're all Republican. Just look at who, I mean, we want to be real, like safe banking bill, Chuck Schumer's completely inept. And I mean, he owes us one. He could have definitely taken it to the floor for a vote. But Republicans, there were, I mean, Mitch McConnell is a Republican. I mean, he's blocked progress in the cannabis industry. Kamala's going to have talking points. Not many of them are going to stick as it relates to Trump, as a lot of what he said holds true. States' rights, people shouldn't be in jail for cannabis. He's being very sensible about it.
Christopher Brady hasn't stolen, nor does Trump own the topic. I beg to differ, my friend. Based on the last 24 hours, that's a pretty bold stance. We've never heard that kind of endorsement for Schedule 3 with regards to Amendment 3, I should say, more importantly than Schedule 3 or rescheduling. But Amendment 3, I've never seen, nor with safe banking, that kind of conviction put together into a post. But look, I hope that it's brought up tomorrow night, and I hope it's spoken positively. And there's a lot of like positive momentum built for both sides of the table. I think it's something that we've always wanted. And this is something that I think all of us that have been following this space have needed for quite some time. So all eyes, especially from this investor community, will be on that debate tomorrow night. But regardless, it'll be fun.
The funny thing too is the Florida State Democratic Caucus has officially endorsed Amendment 3. So Donald Trump and the Florida Senate Democratic Caucus are on the same side of history as it relates to Amendment 3. And it seems like the only people that are going to be on the wrong side of history here are Governor DeSantis and his cronies.
Yep. Anthony Gambino writes, Anthony, no, not that one. What was the other one? It's like Donald Trump is actually watching our podcast. You know what? He does. He does watch our podcast.
There are people very close to the podcast that I'm not going to name names that are feeding Trump's camp direct talking points. So that's not too far off.
And don't think clips like this aren't being used, but that's the kind of direction and approach that we're taking. Like I said before, we start out small, but we're growing here. This is a community. So like, subscribe, and push this out to your network. This is the whole reason why I say this time and time again, because we're on to the next stage, the new era. You know, we've been at this for 12 months doing this live stream. Well, guess what? We've grown over twice as far as our audience and subscribers in the last 12 months. And that is only going to grow substantially if we get a ton of news with regards to cannabis reform. So we appreciate obviously the comments and feedback for people liking and subscribing every single day as well. Make sure to subscribe to our Baked In newsletter to get the latest updates that we're hearing from Washington. Anthony, you're going to outline all that information regarding in your daily Baked In newsletter that you can see at the lower left-hand corner of this template with their QR code. Dan Aarons from MSOs is going to hop on back with us. I know it's been about a bunch of scheduling conflicts over the past 3 weeks, but he's back on Wednesday to talk more about this, among other things. And I'm sure we'll get a recap on the debate, which is taking place tomorrow night, beginning at, is it 8 or 9 o'clock? Do you know?
It's probably 9, but I was just thinking about it. You know who I actually want someone to ask about cannabis?
Who?
Is JD Vance.
You know what I was found hilarious? Michigan played Texas on Saturday at the Big House in front of 113,000 fans, got their butts kicked, but there was a plane with messaging going over top of Michigan Stadium saying JD Vance loves Ohio State. Talk about getting desperate, but man, oh man, whatever you got to do, you got to get creative just to get votes. And I know that's a swing state right now. It's very tight. So yeah, who knows? But anyways, listen, appreciate the time. Thanks for checking in. And I appreciate everybody for being patient. Don't sleep on psychedelics. I know it's further on down the road, but my God, if one of these drugs passes, there's some crazy market caps that'll start to be allocated to a small select few of companies right now. But the message I got basically from Christian was that don't get distracted by what happened last month with MDMA. There's plenty of great stuff on the horizon. It's just going to take time, but onwards and upwards, right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, sir.
All up from here.
Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'll see you back here Wednesday.
See ya.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching our latest podcast. Lots of momentum building. You guys getting all excited? Leave comments below. Again, we want to take this viral. Smash that like button and make sure to click on that bell for all notifications as we start to bring on bigger and bigger guests. Don't forget to subscribe to our daily newsletter, the Baked In newsletter, by logging on to thedalesreport.com. And we want to take this viral, as I said, and make this community grow. So make sure to subscribe on that channel because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everyone, for watching.